The bullet grazed his shoulder as he dove behind the overturned wagon. And Boone Zimmerman didn't flinch because pain had become just another companion in a life stripped bare of everything except survival, and the scarred gray dog lying beside him. It was September 1876, and Montana City sprawled dirty and desperate along the creek that gave it life. Gold had brought men here 5 years earlier, but now most of the easy pickings were gone, leaving behind those too stubborn or too broken to move on. Boone fell into the latter category, though he'd never admit it out loud. The dog, a mixed breed with wolf blood running through his veins, had found him 2 winters back when Boone was half frozen in a lined shack north of here. The animal had curled against him through that endless night, sharing warmth that saved both their lives. Since then, they'd been inseparable. The shooting stopped. Boone peered over the wagon's splintered edge and saw the 3 men who tried to rob him riding hard toward the mountains. They'd picked the wrong target. He had nothing worth stealing except his horse, his rifle, and the dog he'd named Ash for the color of his coat. Everything else that mattered had been taken from him years ago. "Come on, boy," Boone muttered, checking the graze on his shoulder. It was nothing. He'd had worse. Ash followed him through the muddy street toward the livery stable where he kept his gelding. The dog moved with a limp from an old injury, probably from before they'd met. Boone never asked about the dog's past, and the dog never asked about his. That was how they worked. The stable was run by an old-timer named Dutch who asked too many questions. Boone paid him in advance, checked on his horse, and then headed toward the saloon. Not to drink, though God knew the temptation was there. He had business with a man who owed him money for tracking down stolen cattle last month. Ash stayed close to his heels, ears forward and alert. The dog trusted no one except Boone, and barely trusted him on bad days. Any stranger who got too close received a warning growl that usually sent them stepping back. Children learned quickly to give the gray dog wide berth. Their mothers warned them about wild things that couldn't be tamed, and they weren't entirely wrong. Boone pushed through the saloon doors and scanned the dim interior. His man wasn't there. He turned to leave and nearly collided with a woman carrying a stack of folded linens so high she couldn't see over them. "Watch it," he said, rougher than he meant. The linens tumbled to the dirt. The woman made a small sound of frustration and dropped to her knees, gathering them up. Boone should have helped, should have apologized. Instead, he stepped around her and kept walking. Ash didn't follow. Boone stopped, turned back. The dog sat 3 feet from the woman, head tilted, watching her with an intensity that made Boone's chest tighten. In 2 years, Ash had never shown interest in another human being. "Ash," he called. The dog's ears flicked, but he didn't move. The woman had gathered most of the linens and now looked up at Boone. She was younger than he'd thought, maybe 25, with dark blonde hair pinned back in a simple style and gray eyes that matched the Montana sky before a storm. Pretty, if a man cared about such things. Boone didn't anymore. "Your dog?" she asked. "Yeah, he's beautiful." She didn't try to touch Ash, which showed more sense than most people had. Instead, she gathered the last of the linens and stood. "I'm sorry for being in your way." "You weren't," Boone said, which was as close to an apology as he could manage. "Come on, Ash." The dog finally obeyed, but he looked back at the woman twice as they walked away. Boone found his man at the general store and collected his money without trouble. He bought supplies, including a soup bone for Ash, and headed back to his camp outside town. He preferred it out here, away from people and their noise and their expectations. He had a canvas tent, a bedroll, a fire ring, and that was all he needed. That night he lay awake longer than usual, watching Ash gnaw the bone beside the fire. The dog had never acted like that around a stranger before. It bothered him in a way he couldn't name. Over the next 3 days, Boone saw the woman twice more, once carrying baskets of laundry toward the creek, and once sweeping the boardwalk in front of the boarding house on 3rd Street. She noticed him both times, offering a slight nod that he didn't return. Ash noticed her too, perking up when they passed, and that bothered Boone even more. On the 4th day, he had to go into the boarding house. A man named Carson lived there, and Carson had information about a job tracking horse thieves. Boone needed work. His money wouldn't last forever. The woman answered his knock. Up close, he could see freckles across her nose and shadows under her eyes that spoke of long hours and short sleep. "I'm looking for Carson," Boone said. "2nd floor, room 4. She stepped aside to let him in. Her eyes went to Ash. "Will your dog be all right on the porch? Mrs. Henley doesn't allow animals inside. He'll wait." But when Boone told Ash to stay, the dog whined low in his throat and looked at the woman with what could only be called longing. It was so unexpected that Boone just stared. "I could watch him," the woman offered quietly. "I mean, I'm working out front anyway, scrubbing down the porch furniture." He wouldn't be alone. Every instinct told Boone to refuse. Ash didn't like people. Ash barely tolerated existence. But the dog was already sitting at the woman's feet, staring up at her like she was the most interesting thing in Montana territory. "Fine," Boone said, "but he bites." "I won't touch him unless he wants me to." She smiled slightly. "I'm Olivia Vance, by the way. I work here." He didn't offer his name in return, just headed up the stairs. The meeting with Carson took 20 minutes. The job was simple, the pay fair. Boone agreed to start tracking in 2 days. When he came back downstairs, he expected to find Ash pacing the porch anxiously. Instead, the dog lay on his side in a patch of sunlight while Olivia Vance sat on a chair 4 feet away, scrubbing down a small table. She was humming something soft and wordless. Ash's eyes were half closed, his body relaxed in a way Boone had rarely seen. "We're leaving," Boone said sharply. Ash lifted his head, saw Boone, and stood slowly. He went to Boone but looked back at Olivia once more. "He's a good boy," Olivia said. "Didn't make a sound." Boone grunted and left. But he couldn't shake the image of his dog, peaceful and almost content, lying in the sun while a stranger hummed nearby. The tracking job took him away for 5 days. He and Ash covered 40 miles, found the stolen horses hidden in a canyon south of Virginia City, and reported back to Carson with the location. The territorial marshal handled the actual recovery. Boone just collected his money and returned to Montana City. It was late afternoon when they rode back into town. Boone needed a hot meal and a bath, in that order. He stopped at the restaurant next to the boarding house, tied his horse outside, and went in with Ash at his heels. The owner, a Chinese man named Lee, was one of the few who tolerated the dog inside. Boone ordered steak and potatoes, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. While he waited, Ash suddenly stood and walked to the window, tail beginning a slow wag. Olivia Vance was outside, walking past with a basket of vegetables from the market. "That woman must have magic in her hands," Lee said, following Boone's gaze. "Your dog never wags his tail." "He wags it," Boone said defensively. "Not like that." The food came and Boone ate in silence, but his mind kept drifting to the woman outside. He knew nothing about her except her name and where she worked. It shouldn't matter. It didn't matter. Except his dog, his only companion, his only connection to anything resembling trust or affection, had decided she was worth noticing. After he ate, Boone went to the bathhouse behind the barber shop. Ash waited outside, which was normal. What wasn't normal was coming out an hour later to find the dog gone. Boone's heart stopped. In 2 years, Ash had never wandered off, Never. He searched the immediate area, calling quietly so he wouldn't look like a damn fool. Nothing. His chest grew tight. The dog was all he had. All he allowed himself to have. He was about to expand his search when he saw Ash trotting around the corner of the boarding house, tail high. The dog saw him and broke into a loping run, circling back like he hadn't just scared Boone half to death. "Where the hell were you?" Boone grabbed Ash's scruff, checking him over for injuries. The dog was fine, and his muzzle was damp like he'd been drinking fresh water. "He came to visit me." Boone spun. Olivia stood on the boarding house's back porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "I was beating rugs out back and he just appeared. I gave him water. I hoped that was all right." Relief turned to anger, though Boone couldn't say what he was angry at: the dog for leaving, the woman for being there, himself for caring so much. "Keep your water," he said, "and stop encouraging him." He regretted the words as soon as they left his mouth, especially when he saw her face close up like shutters in a storm. "I didn't encourage anything," Olivia said quietly. "He came to me, but I'll make sure to chase him off next time." She went inside before Boone could respond. Not that he would have. He didn't know what to say. Didn't know why his chest felt hollow watching her go. That night at his camp, Ash lay with his head on his paws staring toward town. Boone threw another stick on the fire. "She's nobody to us," he told the dog. "We don't need people. We don't need anybody." Ash sighed deeply and closed his eyes, but Boone saw the lie for what it was. Maybe the dog didn't need people, but he sure seemed to want this particular person. And that was terrifying in ways Boone couldn't fully articulate. He'd lost everyone he ever loved. His parents to cholera when he was 16. His younger sister to childbirth 3 years after that. The woman he'd planned to marry shot in a stagecoach robbery 5 years ago. He'd learned the lesson. Loving people meant losing them. So he'd stopped opening himself to that kind of pain. The dog had been different. Animals didn't live as long anyway, so the eventual loss was expected, understood. And Ash had chosen him, not the other way around. Boone had been able to accept the dog's companionship without really examining what it meant. But now Ash was choosing someone else too, and Boone felt something crack inside the walls he'd built so carefully. 3 days passed. Boone took a job helping a rancher move cattle to winter pasture. It was hard work that kept him busy from dawn to dusk. Ash worked alongside him, proving his worth by keeping the herd together with an intelligence that impressed even the rancher's experienced hands. When they returned to Montana City, the rancher paid him well and offered more work in the spring. Boone accepted. Steady work was hard to find. It was Sunday, and the town was quieter than usual. Many folks were at church, though Boone had given up on God around the same time he'd given up on people. He bought supplies at the general store and was loading them onto his horse when he heard raised voices. "I said you're fired. Pack your things and get out." Boone looked toward the boarding house. A heavy-set woman in an expensive dress stood on the front porch, pointing at Olivia Vance. "Mrs. Henley, please, I can explain about the sheets. The line broke. It wasn't my fault. Everything is your fault. You're clumsy and slow, and I'm tired of making excuses for you. Out, now." Olivia's face was pale but composed. "May I at least stay until I find other lodging? I've been sleeping in the attic room. I can pay. You'll be gone by sundown or I'll have the marshal remove you." Mrs. Henley went inside, slamming the door. Olivia stood frozen for a moment, then walked quickly down the street with her head high but her shoulders trembling. Ash pulled against the reins tied to the hitching post, whining. "Not our business," Boone told him. The dog whined louder. "She's a grown woman. She'll figure it out." But Boone knew the reality of Montana City. Jobs were scarce, especially for women, lodging even more so, and winter was coming. A woman alone without work or shelter faced grim prospects, still not his problem. He mounted his horse and rode back toward his camp. Ash followed reluctantly, looking back toward town every few minutes. At camp, Boone unsaddled his gelding and started a fire for coffee. The afternoon wore into evening. He cooked beans and bacon, fed Ash, and tried to ignore the guilt gnawing at his gut. The dog wouldn't eat, just lay by the fire staring at Boone with reproachful eyes. "What do you want from me?" Boone demanded. "I don't know her. I don't owe her anything." Ash stood and walked to the edge of camp, looking toward town. "We don't help people. That's not what we do." The dog turned and looked at him with an expression that somehow conveyed profound disappointment. Boone lasted until full dark. Then he cursed, saddled his horse, and rode back to town with Ash trotting ahead like he'd known all along how this would end. The boarding house was dark except for one window on the third floor. Boone dismounted and stood in the street, feeling like an idiot. What was he going to do? Knock on the door and demand to see a woman he barely knew? Offer help she probably didn't want from a man who'd been nothing but rude to her? The front door opened, and Olivia came out carrying a carpet bag and a small trunk. She set them on the boardwalk, went back inside, and emerged with a second bag. She was leaving, but she had nowhere to go. Boone could see it in the way she looked up and down the street, like maybe a solution would appear. Ash walked right up to her. She saw the dog and her face transformed. She knelt down, and Ash did something he'd never done with anyone except Boone. He licked her face. Olivia laughed, a sound that was half sob, and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck. Ash let her hold him, even leaned into the embrace, and Boone felt something in his chest shift irreversibly. He stepped out of the shadows. "You need a place to stay." Olivia startled, pulling back from Ash. She saw Boone and stood quickly, wiping her eyes. "I'm fine. I'll figure something out." "There's nowhere to figure. Town's full up and you know it." "I appreciate your concern, but I have a tent. Extra canvas I can rig up as a shelter. It's not much, but it's dry and there's a fire." She stared at him. "You're offering me your camp, just until you find something else." Boone shifted uncomfortably. "The dog likes you." "He's never liked anyone before. Seems important to him that you're all right." Olivia looked down at Ash, then back at Boone. "I don't even know your name." "Boone Zimmerman. Mr. Zimmerman, I can't just go out to your camp. People would talk. People already talk." "And it's Boone, not Mr. Zimmerman." He met her eyes. "I'm offering help, not trouble. You can trust me or not, but decide fast because I'm tired and I want to go to sleep." She studied his face for a long moment. Then she looked at Ash again. The dog sat between them, tail wagging slowly, looking from one to the other like he was holding his breath. "All right," Olivia said quietly. "Thank you." Boone loaded her bags onto his horse. Olivia walked beside him as they headed out of town, with Ash trotting happily ahead like he'd orchestrated the whole thing. Maybe he had. The camp was a 15-minute walk from town, hidden in a grove of cottonwoods near the creek. Boone had chosen it for privacy and access to water. Now he wondered if he'd made a massive mistake. He knew nothing about living with another person. Hadn't even tried in years. But he'd made the offer and he'd see it through. He strung up canvas between two trees, creating a simple lean-to structure separate from his own tent. He gave her 2 blankets, apologizing that he didn't have more. She assured him it was fine, more than fine. She was grateful. The awkwardness stretched between them like barbed wire. Finally, Boone said, "There's beans left if you're hungry." "I ate earlier, but thank you." Silence again. Ash had no such reservations. He curled up right outside Olivia's lean-to like he'd claimed guard duty. "He doesn't usually do that," Boone said. "What? Stay with other people? He sleeps by me or by the fire, never anywhere else." Olivia smiled, and it changed her whole face, made her beautiful in a way that sent alarm bells ringing in Boone's head. Maybe he knows I need a friend tonight. Maybe. Boone turned away. I'll be up early. Don't let me wake you. He escaped to his tent and lay in his bedroll, staring at the canvas above him. What had he done? Having her here would complicate everything, would make him vulnerable in ways he'd sworn to avoid. But when he heard her crying quietly in the lean-to, trying to muffle the sounds, he was glad she wasn't alone. Glad Ash was there to comfort her. Glad, despite everything, that he'd made the offer. He was going soft. It would probably get him killed. But tomorrow was soon enough to worry about that. Morning came cold and gray with the promise of rain. Boone woke to the smell of coffee and sat up confused. He always made the coffee. He crawled out of his tent and found Olivia crouched by the fire, tending the pot. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I woke early and thought I'd make myself useful. You don't have to, I know, but I want to." She poured him a cup. "You helped me. Let me help you." The coffee was good, better than his usual bitter brew. They drank in silence while Ash sat between them, looking pleased with himself. "I'll find work today," Olivia said. "I can cook and clean, do laundry, mend clothes. Someone in town must need help." Boone had his doubts but kept them to himself. "I'll ride out with you. Need to check on a few things anyway." They went to town together. Olivia asked at the restaurant, the hotel, the general store, even the saloon. No one was hiring. The economy was tight and jobs scarce. By noon, her determined expression had started to crack. "There's other towns," Boone offered. "Virginia City's bigger, more opportunities. I don't have money for a stage ticket, could ride there. I don't have a horse, could ride with me." She looked at him searchingly. "Why are you helping me?" "Because my dog loves you, and I've never seen him love anything except maybe me. And somehow that means something I don't want to examine too closely. Because you're kind to him, and kindness is rare. Because something about you makes me feel less hollow inside. Because I can," Boone said instead. They ended up at the livery where Dutch was mucking out stalls. He straightened when he saw them, grinning wide. "Well now, Boone Zimmerman with a lady friend. Never thought I'd see the day." "She needs work," Boone said flatly. "You know anyone hiring?" Dutch scratched his gray beard. "Widow Morrison needs help with her kids. 3 young ones, and her husband died last month. Can't pay much, but it's room and board plus a little coin." Olivia perked up. "Where does she live?" "Ranch about 5 miles north. I can tell her you're coming if you want to go out there tomorrow." "Yes, please. Thank you so much." They left the livery, and Olivia was smiling for the first time since Boone had met her. Room and board, that would solve everything. Something in Boone's chest sank, which was ridiculous. This was good news. She'd be settled, safe, employed. She'd move out to the widow's ranch and life would go back to normal. Except when they returned to camp that evening. And Olivia cooked dinner, actual dinner with vegetables and seasoning and bread she'd bought at the general store. It didn't feel like something he wanted to lose. And when she laughed at Ash trying to catch a grasshopper, the sound bright and real, Boone realized the walls he'd built were crumbling faster than he could repair them. That night after Olivia had gone to her lean-to, Boone sat by the fire with Ash. "You did this," he told the dog. "You brought her into our lives." Ash yawned and rested his head on Boone's knee, something he only did when he was completely content. "She's leaving tomorrow, going to the widow's ranch." The dog's ears drooped. "It's good for her. Steady work, safe place," Ash whined softly. "I know," Boone whispered. "I know." The rain started just after midnight, a steady downpour that turned the camp into a muddy mess. Boone woke to water dripping through a seam in his tent and cursed quietly. He crawled out to check the fire and found Olivia huddled in her lean-to, the canvas sagging under the weight of accumulated water. "You're getting soaked," Boone said. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was shivering and the blankets around her were damp. Boone made a decision before he could overthink it. "Come on. My tent's dryer. We'll both fit." "Boone, I can't. It's practical, not improper. You'll catch pneumonia out here." After a moment's hesitation, she grabbed her blankets and followed him. His tent was meant for one person, but they managed, lying on opposite sides with Ash between them like a furry chaperone. The dog seemed delighted with the arrangement. In the darkness, listening to the rain drum overhead, Olivia spoke quietly. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends on the question." "Why do you live out here instead of in town? Prefer it?" "But why?" Boone was silent for so long she probably thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he said, "I lost people. Family. Someone I was going to marry, lost them all and decided it was easier to not let anyone close again. Out here alone, I don't have to worry about losing anything except the dog, and he found me, not the other way around." "I'm sorry," Olivia whispered. "Not your fault. Still sorry it happened." More silence. Then Boone asked, "What about you? How'd you end up in Montana City?" "Came west 2 years ago with my parents and younger brother. They wanted to start fresh, find gold maybe. My father had big dreams." Her voice went tight. "There was an accident on the trail. A wagon overturned crossing a river. My parents and brother drowned. I survived because I'd been walking alongside instead of riding. I had nothing, knew no one. Mrs. Henley gave me work and a place to sleep. I thought I was lucky until I realized she'd hired me because she could underpay and overwork me without complaint, but it was better than nothing. Until today." "Until today," she paused. "But then you helped me, you and Ash, so maybe I'm still lucky after all." Boone didn't feel like luck. He felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing he was about to fall and unable to stop himself. The rain continued through the night. When morning came gray and damp, they emerged from the tent to find the camp thoroughly soaked. No way to make a fire with wet wood. They ate cold biscuits and dried beef for breakfast. "We should still go see Mrs. Morrison," Olivia said. "Rain won't stop her from needing help." They rode out mid-morning, Olivia sitting behind Boone on his gelding with her arms around his waist. It felt too intimate, too right. Ash trotted alongside, unbothered by the wet. The Morrison ranch was a modest spread with a small house and barn. A woman in her 30s answered their knock, looking exhausted. 3 children peeked out from behind her skirts. "Mrs. Morrison. Dutch from the livery sent us. This is Miss Olivia Vance. She's looking for work." The widow's face softened. "Please come in." They spent an hour at the house. Mrs. Morrison explained that her husband had died when his horse threw him, breaking his neck. She was struggling to manage the ranch and care for her children alone. She needed help desperately, and Olivia seemed like an answer to prayer. "When can you start?" Mrs. Morrison asked. Olivia glanced at Boone. "Today, if you need me." "That would be wonderful." It was settled. Olivia would live in the small room off the kitchen, help with cooking and cleaning, and the children earn $20 a month plus room and board. It was a good situation. Exactly what she needed. Boone should have been relieved. Instead, as they rode back to camp to collect Olivia's things, he felt like someone was tightening a noose around his chest. Ash seemed equally unhappy, plodding along with his head low. At camp, Olivia packed quickly. She didn't own much. When she was ready, she knelt and called Ash over. "You're a good boy," she told him, stroking his head. "The best boy. Thank you for being my friend." Ash licked her face and whined when she stood up. Boone loaded her bags onto his horse. The ride back to the Morrison ranch was silent. When they arrived, Mrs. Morrison came out to greet them warmly. Olivia slid down from the horse and collected her things. She looked up at Boone. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. I won't forget your kindness." "It wasn't kindness," Boone said. It was just he couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't know how, Olivia smiled sadly. Either way, thank you. She walked into the house without looking back. Mrs. Morrison waved and closed the door. Boone sat on his horse, staring at the closed door, feeling like he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Come on, Ash, let's go. The dog didn't move. He sat facing the house, tail still, every line of his body radiating misery. Ash. Now. Reluctantly, the dog followed. They returned to camp, and it felt empty in a way it never had before. Boone tried to go about his usual routine, but everything felt wrong. The coffee tasted bitter. The fire gave no warmth. Even Ash refused to eat, just lay by the fire looking toward the direction of the Morrison ranch. She's better off there, Boone told him. Safe, employed, not living in a wet canvas lean-to with a man who doesn't know how to talk to people. Ash's reproachful look said he wasn't buying it. Night fell. Boone forced down some food and crawled into his tent. He lay awake for hours, remembering the sound of Olivia's laugh, the way she'd looked at Ash with such gentleness, the feel of her arms around his waist on the ride to the ranch. He was in trouble, deep trouble. The next morning he had a job leading a supply wagon to a mining camp in the mountains. It would take 3 days. Good. Distance would help. He'd forget about Olivia Vance and her gray eyes and her kindness. Life would return to the simple, solitary existence he understood. But when he returned 4 days later, Ash immediately began pulling toward the north, toward the Morrison ranch. No, Boone said firmly. The dog sat down in the middle of the street and refused to move. We're not going out there. She's working. We'd be interrupting. Ash whined. I said no. They had a staring contest that Boone won through sheer stubbornness. Ash finally stood and followed him back to camp, but the dog's disapproval was palpable. 2 weeks passed. Boone took every job he could find, staying busy to avoid thinking. It didn't work. Olivia haunted his thoughts during the day and his dreams at night. Ash grew increasingly sullen, barely eating, his limp more pronounced. Boone told himself the dog was just getting older, that the limp was from old injuries acting up. But he knew the truth. Ash was heartbroken, and so, despite all his defenses, was Boone. It was a Saturday afternoon when Dutch found him at the general store. Got news about your lady friend, Dutch said. Boone's heart jumped. She's not my what news. Saw Mrs. Morrison in town this morning. She had Miss Vance with her. Said the girl's a godsend, best help she could have asked for. Kids love her too. Good, Boone said flatly. That's good, Mrs. Morrison also mentioned that Miss Vance asks about you every time someone comes by the ranch, wanting to know if you're all right, if your dog's eating properly. Dutch grinned. Sounds like maybe she's interested. You're imagining things. Am I? Because I've known you 3 years and I've never seen you look as miserable as you have these past 2 weeks. Not since I've known you, anyway. Boone wanted to argue but couldn't muster the energy. Doesn't matter. She's got a good situation. I'm not going to mess that up. Who says you'd mess it up? Maybe you'd make it better. Boone bought his supplies and left without responding, but Dutch's words followed him back to camp. That night Ash refused dinner entirely. He just lay by the fire staring north, and Boone couldn't take it anymore. Fine, he said. Fine. We'll go see her tomorrow, just to check in. Make sure she's all right. Then we leave and don't go back. Agreed. Ash's tail wagged once. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. October had arrived and winter wasn't far behind. Boone saddled his horse, telling himself this was about the dog, not about him. He was doing this for Ash. Liar, whispered a voice in his head. The Morrison ranch looked peaceful in the morning light. Smoke curled from the chimney. Chickens pecked in the yard. Before Boone could knock, the door flew open and 3 children rushed out. It's the dog. the oldest shouted. "Miss Olivia, the gray dog, is here." Ash was immediately surrounded by children wanting to pet him. To Boone's shock, the dog tolerated it, even seemed to enjoy it. His tail wagged as small hands patted his head and back. Then Olivia appeared in the doorway and everything else ceased to matter. She wore a simple blue dress with an apron over it, her hair in a braid down her back. Her face lit up when she saw them. "Boone! Ash!" She came down the steps. "I was hoping you'd visit. Wanted to check on you," Boone said awkwardly. "Make sure you're settling in." "I am. Mrs. Morrison is wonderful and the children are sweet." She knelt by Ash, who pressed against her like they'd been separated for years instead of weeks. "I've missed you," she told the dog. Then she looked up at Boone. "Both of you." Mrs. Morrison came to the door. "Mr. Zimmerman, thank you for bringing Miss Vance to us. She's been such a blessing. Will you stay for lunch? It's the least we can offer." Boone should have refused. Should have made his excuses and left. Instead, he heard himself say, "That would be nice. Thank you." Lunch was roasted chicken with potatoes and carrots, simple food made special by companionship. The children chattered constantly, telling stories about their week. Olivia served and ate with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. After the meal, Mrs. Morrison suggested Olivia show Boone the new garden plot they'd been working on. It was an obvious excuse to give them privacy, but Boone didn't object. They walked behind the barn where fresh-turned earth marked the future garden. Ash followed, staying close to Olivia. "He looks thin," Olivia said quietly. "Won't eat much. Hasn't since you left." "Has he been limping more?" "Yeah," she bit her lip. "I worry about him." "He worries about you too. Stares north every night like he can see through the darkness to check on you." "I think about you both constantly," Olivia admitted. "Wonder if you're warm enough, if you're eating properly, if you're lonely." The word hung between them. Lonely. Yes, Boone was lonely, had been lonely for 5 years, but he'd gotten used to it. Except now he knew what it felt like to have Olivia in his camp, cooking dinner and laughing at his dog's antics, and the loneliness had become unbearable. "You've got a good situation here," Boone said. "Don't waste time worrying about us." "But I do." She turned to face him fully. "Boone, can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I might not answer." "Do you ever get tired of being alone?" The question hit harder than any physical blow. Boone looked at her standing there in the October sunlight, brave and honest and beautiful, and something inside him cracked wide open. "Every single day," he said quietly. "But alone is safe." Safe from what? From losing people. From the pain that comes when they leave or die or get taken away. "So you're choosing loneliness over the risk of loss." Her voice was gentle, not judging. "Is that really living? It's surviving. There's a difference." Boone had no answer to that. They stood in silence for a long moment before Olivia spoke again. "I was alone after my family died. Alone in my grief, alone in a new place, alone even when I was surrounded by people at the boarding house. Then I met Ash, and through him I met you, and for the first time in 2 years I didn't feel alone. Even those few days at your camp, sleeping in a leaking lean-to, I felt more at home than I had anywhere since losing my family." She paused. "I miss that feeling. I miss you both." "Olivia, I know I'm being forward. I know we barely know each other. But life is short and uncertain, and I don't want to waste time pretending I don't feel something real." Boone's heart hammered against his ribs. Everything he'd built, every defense he'd constructed was crumbling to dust. And for the first time in 5 years, he was too tired to fight it. "I feel it too," he said hoarsely. "Scares the hell out of me." She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Me too." They stood there, not touching but connected by something neither could name. Ash sat between them, tail wagging, looking absurdly pleased with himself. Mrs. Morrison called from the house that it was getting late. Boone forced himself to step back. I should go. Will you come back? Visit again? Everything in him wanted to say yes. Wanted to promise he'd come every day, that he'd find a way to make this work, but fear still had its claws in him. I don't know, he said honestly. Disappointment flickered across Olivia's face, but she nodded. I understand. They walked back to the house. Boone thanked Mrs. Morrison for lunch, mounted his horse, and called Ash. The dog came reluctantly, looking back at Olivia until they were out of sight. The ride back to camp felt longer than usual. Boone's mind churned with conflicting thoughts and feelings. He'd spent 5 years closing himself off, building walls, choosing safety over connection. It had worked. He'd been empty, but he'd survived. Now Olivia was offering him something else, something that terrified and tempted him in equal measure. She was offering life, real life, with all its risks and joys and potential for pain. At camp, Ash immediately curled up by the fire, finally eating the food Boone offered. Seeing Olivia had done him good. Boone couldn't say the same for himself. He felt raw, exposed, like every nerve was on fire. That night he dreamed of Sarah, the woman he'd planned to marry. He hadn't dreamed of her in over a year. In the dream, she stood in a field of wildflowers, smiling at him. You're allowed to be happy, she said. You're allowed to love again. I can't lose anyone else, Boone told her. It'll kill me. You're already dying. Slowly maybe, but dying all the same. Living without love, without connection, that's not life. That's just waiting to stop breathing. He woke before dawn, Sarah's words echoing in his head. His tent was cold and empty. Outside, Ash slept by the dead fire. Everything felt colorless, meaningless. Sarah was right. So was Olivia. He wasn't living. He was existing, and there was a difference. The question was whether he had the courage to change. October turned to November. The air grew colder, the nights longer. Boone took jobs that kept him busy, but his heart wasn't in it. He was going through motions, mechanical and hollow. Ash had perked up after their visit to the Morrison ranch, but as days stretched into weeks without returning, the dog's depression returned. He stopped chasing rabbits, stopped wagging his tail, just lay by the fire and stared north with eyes that broke Boone's heart. I'm sorry, Boone told him one evening. I know you love her. I know you want to see her, but I'm trying to protect us both. The dog looked at him with something that might have been pity. 2 days later, Dutch found him again. Mrs. Morrison was in town, says Miss Vance is doing well, but asks about you every time. Also says the girl looks sad, even though she tries to hide it. Boone said nothing. You're an idiot, Dutch said bluntly. You've got a woman who cares about you, a dog who's miserable without her, and you're sitting in a damn tent feeling sorry for yourself. You don't understand. I understand just fine. You lost people. Life hurt you, and you decided never to feel anything again. But that woman out there, she lost people too, her whole family, and you know what she's doing. Living anyway, being brave anyway, opening her heart anyway. Dutch shook his head. Maybe take a lesson from her. He left before Boone could respond. That night was the coldest yet. Boone built the fire high and wrapped himself in both blankets, but he couldn't get warm. Ash pressed against him, sharing heat, and Boone remembered the winter when they'd found each other. How the dog had saved his life just by being there. Ash had taught him that connection mattered. That love, even for an animal, was worth the risk. Why couldn't he extend that lesson to Olivia? Because animals don't betray you, don't leave by choice, don't die in stagecoach robberies and leave you hollow inside. But they do die, Boone reminded himself. Ash wouldn't live forever. Maybe 10 more years if he was lucky. And when the dog died, Boone would be devastated. The pain would be immense. But he wouldn't trade the past 2 years with Ash for anything. The companionship, the loyalty, the simple presence of another living being who cared it had been worth it. Why should Olivia be any different? The answer, he realized, was that she shouldn't be. Love was risk, always. But the alternative was the slow death of isolation, and he was so tired of being cold. Dawn came and Boone made a decision. He broke camp quickly, packing everything onto his horse. Ash watched with interest, tail beginning a cautious wag. "We're taking a gamble," Boone told him. "Might blow up in our faces, but you were right all along. She's worth it." The dog barked, the first real sound of joy Boone had heard from him in weeks. They rode to the Morrison ranch, arriving mid-morning. Mrs. Morrison answered his knock looking surprised. "Mr. Zimmerman, we weren't expecting you. Is Olivia here? I need to talk to her." "She's in the barn with the children. They're collecting eggs." Boone found her in the barn, surrounded by giggling children and chickens. She looked up when he entered, and her expression cycled through surprise, hope, and caution. "Boone, can we talk?" Privately, she nodded and told the children to finish collecting eggs. Then she followed Boone outside to where Ash waited. The dog rushed to her immediately and she knelt, embracing him. "Hello, beautiful boy. I've missed you so much." Boone waited until she stood, then took a breath and spoke before courage could desert him. "I've been alone for 5 years. Thought that was what I wanted, what I needed. Then my dog decided you were special, and I realized he has better judgment than I do." He paused. "I'm terrified of losing you, terrified of caring and having it ripped away again. But I'm more terrified of living the rest of my life without ever taking the risk." Olivia's eyes shimmered with tears. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try. Want to court you properly if you'll have me. Want to see where this goes, even though it scares me. Want to be brave like you are." "Oh, Boone," she stepped closer. "I'm not brave, I'm just as scared as you, but I think we could be scared together." He reached for her hand the first time he deliberately touched her. Her fingers laced through his and it felt like coming home. "I don't have much to offer," he warned. "A tent, a cranky dog, a man who doesn't know how to talk about feelings. I don't need much. Just honesty and effort and maybe a few more visits from you and this cranky dog. We can manage that." They stood there, holding hands, while Ash circled them both with his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. When Olivia laughed, the sound bright with happiness, Boone felt something in his chest unlock. Not completely, not yet, but it was a start. Mrs. Morrison was delighted by the development. She insisted Boone stay for lunch again, and afterward suggested he might visit every Sunday. "It could become a tradition," she said with a knowing smile. Boone agreed. Over the following weeks, he and Olivia built something fragile and precious. He visited every Sunday without fail, and sometimes on Wednesdays too. They talked about everything and nothing, their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Olivia told him about her family's journey west and the day she'd lost them. Boone told her about Sarah and the guilt he'd carried for not being able to save her. "It wasn't your fault," Olivia said gently. "Doesn't stop me from feeling like it was. I know. I felt the same about my family. If I'd been in the wagon instead of walking, maybe I could have helped. Or maybe I'd be dead too. There's no way to know, and that not knowing is torture." They understood each other in ways Boone had never experienced. Both had lost everything. Both had rebuilt from nothing. Both were learning to trust again, one careful step at a time. Ash was their constant companion during visits, perfectly content as long as both his people were together. The children adored him, and the old dog showed patience with them that amazed Boone. "He's changed," Boone observed one Sunday in late November. "More relaxed, happier." "Love does that," Olivia said. "Does it change people too?" "Sometimes, if they let it." Boone thought about that. He did feel different, lighter somehow despite the fear that still gnawed at his edges. Having something to look forward to, someone to visit, conversations that mattered, it gave shape to his weeks. On the first Sunday in December, Boone arrived to find Mrs. Morrison bundling the children into their coats. "We're going to visit my sister in town," she said. "We'll be gone most of the day. Olivia, you have the afternoon off. Perhaps Mr. Zimmerman can stay and keep you company." It was transparently obvious what she was doing, giving them time alone. Boone should have been annoyed. Instead, he was grateful. After the Morrisons left, Olivia and Boone sat in the warm kitchen drinking coffee while Ash slept by the stove. "She's not subtle," Olivia said, smiling. "No, but she means well. She asked me yesterday what my intentions were regarding you." Boone looked up sharply. "What did you say?" "I said my intentions were to see where this goes and hope you feel the same." "I do." He hesitated, then pushed forward. "Olivia, I need to tell you something." "All right. I'm falling in love with you. Probably already have fallen if I'm honest. And it terrifies me because I know how much it hurts to lose someone you love. But I also know that these past few weeks with you have been the best I've had in 5 years, and I don't want to go back to how things were before." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I'm in love with you too. Have been since you offered me your camp that night, maybe even before. When I saw how much you loved your dog, how you'd built a life for yourself after loss, I knew you were someone special." Boone stood and crossed to her, pulling her up from her chair. They stood close, and when he cupped her face in his hands, she leaned into the touch. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Please." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them afraid to break the fragile thing they'd built. But when Olivia's arms went around his neck and she pressed closer, Boone let himself feel the full force of what he'd been holding back. Hope, joy, love that burned away fear until only warmth remained. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I want a future with you," Boone said. "A real future. Marriage, a home, everything, but I need to do this right. Need to have something to offer besides a tent and campfire. Boone, I don't care about, I care. You deserve better than what I have now. Give me time to build something real, a cabin maybe, or a house. Steady work. Something worthy of you." She searched his face. "How much time? Spring?" "By spring I'll have enough saved to buy land and start building, if you're willing to wait. I've waited my whole life for someone like you. A few more months won't kill me." They spent the afternoon talking about possibilities, where they might build, what kind of life they wanted, children maybe if they were blessed, a real home, stable and warm. Ash woke from his nap and came over, pushing his head under their joined hands. Boone laughed. "He wants in on the planning. He should be. He's the one who brought us together." That night, riding back to his camp, Boone felt something he hadn't experienced in half a decade, pure, uncomplicated happiness. Yes, there was still fear. Still the knowledge that loving Olivia meant risking heartbreak. But the alternative, a life without her, was unthinkable now. He spent the winter working harder than he'd ever worked. He took every job available, saved every penny. He filed a claim on 40 acres north of town with a creek running through it and a view of the mountains. The land cost most of his savings, but it was worth it. When he wasn't working, he visited Olivia. Their courtship deepened through the cold months. They talked about everything, learning each other's habits and preferences. Olivia's favorite color was blue. Boone hated raisins. She sang when she was happy. He brooded when he was worried. Ash divided his time between them, content as long as he knew both were safe and happy. The old dog's limp improved with regular meals and less stress. He even put on weight, his coat growing thick and glossy. By January, Boone had enough saved to buy lumber and supplies. He hired 2 men from town to help, and they began building a cabin on his land. It was hard work in the cold, but Boone pushed through. Every wall they raised, every beam they secured was a promise to Olivia. She visited the building site once in early February, bundled against the cold. Boone showed her around the half-finished structure, pointing out where rooms would be. Kitchen here, bedroom there, maybe a second bedroom eventually if we need it. Olivia blushed and Boone realized what he'd implied. "I mean, only if you want, I want," she said softly. "I want everything with you." He kissed her there among the sawdust and half-built walls, with Ash supervising from a sunny spot nearby. The cabin was finished in mid-March. It wasn't large or fancy, but it was solid and well-built. Boone added a stone fireplace, wooden floors, glass windows he'd shipped from Virginia City. He built furniture, a bed frame, a table, chairs, everything he thought they'd need. On the first day of April, with spring flowers blooming across the meadow, Boone rode to the Morrison ranch with Ash trotting beside him. He dressed in his best clothes, which weren't much, and his hands shook as he knocked on the door. Mrs. Morrison answered, took one look at him, and smiled. "She's in the garden." Boone found Olivia planting seeds, her hands muddy and her hair falling from its pins. She looked beautiful. "Olivia." She turned, saw his expression, and stood slowly. "Boone, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right." He crossed to her, took her dirty hands in his. "I have a cabin now, on land I own. It's not much, but it's ours if you want it. I have steady work lined up, enough to support a family. I have a future to offer you instead of just dreams." Her eyes filled with tears. "Are you asking, marry me?" The words came out rough but honest. "I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. You made me want to live again instead of just survive. You and Ash, you're my family, and I want to make it official, so marry me, please." "Yes." She laughed through her tears. "Yes, of course, yes." He kissed her there in the garden with dirt on both their hands and joy in both their hearts. Ash barked and spun in circles, adding his approval to the moment. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Montana City. Mrs. Morrison and her children attended, along with Dutch and a handful of others Boone had come to know through work. It was small and perfect. Olivia wore a dress she'd sewn herself from blue fabric, her favorite color. Boone wore his best clothes and boots he'd polished until they shone. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Boone kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. The celebration afterward was held at the new cabin. Mrs. Morrison brought food, Dutch brought whiskey, and everyone admired the home Boone had built. But the best moment came later, after everyone had left and it was just Boone, Olivia, and Ash. "Welcome home," Boone said, carrying Olivia over the threshold. She laughed and kissed him. "Our home." That night they lay together in the bed Boone had built, with Ash sprawled on a rug by the fireplace. Through the window, stars scattered across the Montana sky. "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, her head on Boone's chest. "More than I have any right to be." "You have every right. You're a good man, Boone Zimmerman." "I'm a lucky man. Lucky your boarding house fired you. Lucky my dog has good taste in people. Lucky you gave me a chance despite my rough edges." "Your rough edges are part of why I love you." They fell asleep tangled together, safe and warm and loved. Life settled into a rhythm over the following months. Boone worked as a tracker and guide, his reputation growing as reliable and skilled. Olivia tended their home and garden, transforming the cabin into something that felt lived in and cherished. Ash supervised both of them, content in his role as family guardian. By summer, Olivia was pregnant. They hadn't planned it so soon, but both were thrilled. Boone found himself terrified and excited in equal measure, already imagining a child with Olivia's gray eyes and gentle spirit. The pregnancy was difficult at times. Olivia was sick in the mornings and exhausted by evening. Boone did everything he could to help cooking, cleaning, taking over the garden. Ash never left her side when she was resting, as if standing guard over both mother and unborn child. "He knows," Olivia said one afternoon, stroking the dog's head. "He knows there's a baby coming." "He's always been smart," Boone agreed. "Smarter than me, anyway." Their son was born in February 1877 during a snowstorm that kept the midwife from arriving until after the birth. Boone delivered his own child with shaking hands and prayers on his lips, and when the baby's cry filled the cabin, he wept with relief. They named him Thomas, after Olivia's father. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect. Ash approached the baby cautiously at first, sniffing carefully. Then the old dog licked Thomas's head gently and looked at Boone as if to say, "This one's ours to protect." "Yes," Boone whispered, "ours to protect." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful. Thomas was a good baby, but any baby required constant attention. Boone and Olivia took turns with nighttime feedings, both running on too little sleep and too much coffee. But watching Olivia with their son, seeing the love and patience she showed, Boone fell even more deeply in love with her. And when Thomas smiled for the first time, a gummy grin directed at Ash, Boone's heart expanded in ways he hadn't known were possible. Life wasn't always easy. Money was sometimes tight. Work was sometimes scarce. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. By the time Thomas was walking, Ash was slowing down noticeably. His muzzle had gone completely gray and his limp was permanent now. He spent most of his time sleeping by the fire or in sunny spots in the yard. "He's getting old," Olivia said quietly one evening. Boone nodded, throat tight. He'd known this day would come. Dogs didn't live forever, but knowing didn't make it easier. "He had a good life," Olivia continued. "You gave him that. Love and safety and a family." "He gave me more," Boone said. "He gave me you." They made Ash as comfortable as possible. Boone built him a padded bed near the fireplace. Olivia cooked him special meals. Thomas, now 2 years old, learned to be gentle with Ashy, patting the old dog's head with careful hands. Ash passed quietly one night in late spring 1879. He went to sleep by the fire and simply didn't wake up. It was peaceful, which Boone was grateful for, but the grief still hit like a physical blow. They buried him on the hill overlooking their cabin, with a view of the mountains he'd loved. Thomas, not quite understanding death yet, left flowers on the grave. Olivia cried quietly while Boone stood with his arm around her, his own tears falling silently. "He brought us together," Olivia said. "I'll never forget that. Neither will I." For weeks after, Boone expected to see Ash by the fire or following at his heels. The absence was a constant ache. But he had Olivia and Thomas, and the life they were building together, and he knew Ash would be pleased about that. That summer, Olivia told him she was pregnant again. Their daughter was born in March 1880, a tiny thing with Boone's dark hair and Olivia's determination. They named her Sarah, after the woman Boone had lost, because Olivia insisted that love honored love. Life continued. Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved animals and the outdoors. Sarah was fearless from the start, climbing everything and afraid of nothing. Boone taught them both to ride, to track, to respect the land. Olivia taught them to read, to be kind, to think before acting. Montana City grew and changed around them. The gold played out and many moved on, but enough stayed to build a real community. Boone became known as someone reliable, someone who kept his word. He and Olivia made friends, slowly and carefully, both still protective of their small family but learning to let people in. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Boone took Olivia back to the spot where he'd proposed. The garden at the Morrison Ranch had grown wild after the widow moved to live with her sister, but flowers still bloomed among the weeds. "You regret it?" Boone asked. "Marrying a rough man who didn't know how to talk about feelings?" "Never." Olivia took his hand. "You learned to talk about feelings, and even when you couldn't, you showed them. In every cabin beam you raised, every meal you cooked when I was pregnant, every gentle word to our children. You show your love every single day. I was so scared of losing you, still am, sometimes. I know. But we're still here, still together. That has to count for something. It counts for everything." They stood there as the sun set over the mountains, two people who'd found each other through loss and a gray dog with better judgment than either of them. They'd built a life from nothing, had created a family, had chosen love despite all the reasons to choose safety instead. Thomas was 10 now, Sarah 6. Both healthy and happy and loved beyond measure. Boone looked at his wife, still beautiful in the fading light, and felt gratitude so intense it hurt. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For being brave enough to trust a broken man and a scarred dog. For seeing something in us worth saving." "You weren't broken," Olivia said firmly. "You were healing. There's a difference." Maybe she was right. Maybe all along he'd been healing, not breaking, and Ash had known it. Had known that Boone needed Olivia as much as she needed them. The dog had been wiser than any of them. They walked home as stars emerged hand in hand. Thomas and Sarah were waiting on the porch, having been watched by Mrs. Morrison's oldest daughter. The children ran to greet them, and Boone swept Sarah into his arms while Olivia hugged Thomas. Inside, their cabin was warm and filled with the evidence of life children's drawings on the walls, boots by the door, the smell of bread Olivia had baked that morning. It was everything Boone had never let himself want, everything he'd been terrified to hope for. That night after the children were asleep, Boone and Olivia sat by the fire. He thought about Ash, about that winter night when a half-wild dog had saved a dying man by sharing warmth. Everything had started there. Every good thing in his life now traced back to that moment. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked. "That I'm grateful for Ash bringing us together, for you being patient with me, for this life we've built. I'm grateful too," she leaned against him, "for a dog who knew what I needed before I did, for a man brave enough to love again, for every day we have together." Outside, wind whispered through the pines. Inside, the fire crackled and settled. Two children slept safely in their beds, dreaming child dreams. And two people who'd lost everything and found each other sat together in the home they'd built, grateful for second chances and wise old dogs. Years passed. Thomas grew tall and serious, eventually becoming a farrier in Montana City. Sarah inherited her father's skill with horses and her mother's fierce heart, working alongside Thomas in the family business they built together. Both married, bringing new faces into the family, expanding the circle of love that had started with one man, one woman, and one gray dog. Boone and Olivia grew old together in the cabin he'd built for her. His hands became gnarled with arthritis, but still reached for hers every morning. Her hair turned silver, but her eyes remained the same gray that had captured him all those years ago. They watched their grandchildren play in the meadow where wildflowers bloomed, and sometimes Boone swore he could see a gray shape running among them, still watching over the family he'd helped create. On a warm evening in June 1904, Boone sat on the porch with Olivia beside him. They were both 70 now, both slower and quieter than they'd been, but still together, still in love. "You remember the day we met?" Olivia asked. "You nearly knocked me over outside the saloon." "I was rude," Boone admitted, "but Ash knew better. He always knew better. He did." He knew we belonged together before either of us figured it out. Smartest damn dog that ever lived. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. 3 generations of family lived nearby now: Thomas with his wife and 4 children, Sarah with her husband and 2. The cabin had been expanded twice to accommodate family gatherings, and hardly a day passed without someone stopping by. "We did all right," Boone said quietly. "Built something good from nothing. We did better than all right. We built something beautiful." That night, lying in the bed he'd made with his own hands 50 years earlier, Boone held his wife close and thought about the journey that had brought them here. The pain and loss that had tried to break him. The dog who'd refused to let him give up. The woman who'd seen past his defenses to the man underneath. "I love you," he whispered into Olivia's hair. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, 2 souls who'd found home in each other's arms. And if in his dreams Boone saw a gray dog with wise eyes and a wagging tail, leading him through mountains toward light and warmth and love, well, that was between him and the memory of the best friend he'd ever had. The story of Boone Zimmerman and Olivia Vance became a family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren. The tale of how a scarred old dog brought 2 broken people together and helped them build a love strong enough to last a lifetime. It was a story about second chances and choosing courage over fear, about trusting in connection even when everything in your past screams to stay isolated and safe. But most of all, it was a story about love, the love of a man for his dog, the love between 2 people who refused to let loss define them, and the love of a family built from nothing but hope and determination, and one gray dog's excellent judgment. And in Montana City, Montana, where the mountains touched the sky and the creek ran clear and cold, that love endured through generations, a testament to what's possible when we're brave enough to open our hearts again, even after they've been broken. When we trust that connection, despite its risks, is what makes life worth living. When we let love in, even when we're terrified of losing it, because the alternative, a life without love, is no life at all. Boone and Olivia understood that truth. They'd lived it, fought for it, built their entire lives around it. And in the end, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, they knew without doubt that every moment of fear, every risk taken, every wall torn down had been worth it. Because love in all its forms was always worth it. The love between a man and his dog. The love between a man and a woman. The love of family and home and life lived fully instead of merely survived. That was the legacy they left behind. Not money or land or possessions, but love. Deep, abiding, transformative love that started with a gray dog's wisdom and grew to encompass generations. And somewhere, in whatever place good dogs go when they leave this world, Ash rested with his head on his paws, tail wagging slowly, pleased with the family he'd helped create, and the love that would endure long after all of them had turned to dust under the Montana sky.